Hey folks, I want to talk today about dealing with media requests and open it up for discussion with you. How should conservatives treat the media? Should we always be distrustful? Should we ever engage them? And most importantly, what are the costs and benefits? Just a note, I'm making a video for new YouTubers in the political realm where I talk a little bit about how to deal with channel ups and downs. So I'll flesh this out a little bit more in another direction in my next video. But I have to admit that the media request I received last week left me a bit frozen, which is why I haven't posted anything in a little while. Because I was not aware that I was on the radar of some of these bigger shows and programs, especially The Daily Show, which is the request I received last week. So what do we do when we get media requests? I met some people in Europe with much more experience in this than I have, and across the board, the advice was to never give interviews to left-wing outlets. Just never, don't do it. And most of the people that I talked to about this had learned the hard way and had done 4-hour interviews with news outlets where they snipped and edited together the most unfavorable 30 seconds or a minute. Interview requests are always worded nicely, and I think this is to lull us into complacency. I got another request earlier last week from Harpers Magazine, and the journalist was really kind and thoughtful in her email, and I felt a bit bad that I was so short with her and refused the interview. And she said that she wanted to acquaint herself with women in the conservative movement and form her own opinions about us, and perhaps see if she is more like us than she had previously anticipated. So I looked into her work history, and she had written for HuffPo and Vanity Fair and The Guardian on previous occasions, which overwhelmed me with skepticism despite how nice she was in her approach, which they always are. So should we do interviews with the left-wing media? The argument that I got most when I tweeted about this and asked friends and family was that I should do the interview and change people's minds. And Matt Christiansen, my podcast co-host, wanted me to do it, and he would have if he were in my situation. But I think he probably has less to atone for than I do, as far as outright controversy that we have independently brought to the table. And they would have much more opportunity for these gotcha moments in my interviews. But I'm not really sure that trying to change people's minds would actually work. I've heard Stefan Molyneux talk about how 90% of people are straight up impervious to ideological shifts based on evidence. So that only leaves 10% of the population that would even be susceptible to my attempts to show them the nature of our reality. And I would argue even less, since there's selection bias for staunch, idiot, hardcore leftists in the Daily Show audience. And that doesn't really seem worth it to me. Although another potential benefit is just the sheer amount of exposure. But I don't know that I want that light shining on me, although at this point it seems kind of unavoidable. It would be almost exclusively negative exposure, and I would have no control over the content or the editing that takes place. The benefits seem few and the costs seem overwhelming. Also, why is The Daily Show asking to interview a YouTuber with 55,000 subs? It's not like I'm Sargon. This really feels like a trap to me, although the information on the producer that sent the request checked out, so I'm fairly confident that it is actually a real request. So I'd imagine that their plan is to splice segments with smaller YouTubers that have said controversial things into some biased mashup that made us appear to be Nazis or something. So especially for The Daily Show, I will be subject to a huge amount of outright ridicule while reaching a minuscule audience that is legitimately persuadable. Tomi Lahren wiped the floor with Trevor Noah, and they still portrayed her as some racist idiot. And they did some clever editing tricks when Gavin McInnes appeared that made him seem like he was also a clueless idiot, even though he was just making jokes here and inventing names for comedic value.
I agreed to be on The Daily Show. Conservatives have been warned. We know what's happening when we go on The Daily Show. You are knowingly throwing yourself to the wolves. But why not try it? Why not see what it's like? Why not see how bad it is firsthand? And whoa! Is it bad? They asked me to discuss my article on Tacky Mag about women in soccer. The American Women's Soccer Federation has decided they're not getting paid enough, even though I was one dude and I was being framed by weeks of time, tons of researchers. Even with all that, all those resources meant to frame us, they still do a terrible job. We do the interview, and it was fun because it was very confrontational. So at the end of it, he asked me to name U.S. soccer players, which I can't do. So I make up these ridiculous names. He goes like this, those are deep cuts. Then they take that joke and pretend I was being serious and add all this VO and say, you got to do better than that. You got to make up a better name than that.
Why would I trust these people and go into the lion's den at such a great potential and personal expense? But on the other hand, there are consequences for speaking what we feel, and one of them is merely getting on the radar of media pests whose ratings are plummeting like The Daily Show. I've noticed that when people or media outlets are losing popularity or relevance, they try to latch on to an emotional thread within the general public that most people can agree on. And one such thing is hating people that they perceive as racist. And I've noticed this recently in some YouTube communities, for example. YouTubers banding together on Twitter and on their channels to expose racists. Like we've seen this being done to Chris Ray Gun this week. Whether or not people are doing it consciously, it is a tactic. So The Daily Show has largely lost relevance, and they need to bring on controversial, smaller fish that their audience can get on board with destroying, that won't have the inevitable backlash that having a Tommy Lahren or a Mark Dice would, since their audience is comprised of literally tens of millions of people. If you're a conservative in a similar position and someone wants to interview, I can't say that you shouldn't do it. But if you do, please record it yourself to hedge against some of the risk of their editing. Some of these requests will improve our name recognition and will actually reach some people. But my advice about this would be to research the person doing the story. We already know the complete absence of integrity that is the defining characteristic of The Daily Show, outside of it not being funny. The woman that was going to interview me for Harper's had written for HuffPo and Vanity Fair, and even though her articles were somewhat apolitical, I guarantee that when this piece comes out, it is just going to be a hit piece on conservative women. And I'll cover the story when it's released and probably talk about how I'm happy I didn't do it. But we have to be calculating with who we give interviews to, while not ending up in an echo chamber and only discussing ideas with people that agree with us. Please let me know what you think in the comments. What is the most effective way to deal with the mainstream media and leftist outlets for conservatives? Also, feel free to drop examples of bad, biased editing and interviewing in the comments. Periodically, I like to do videos about media lies, so this is a good opportunity to collect some information from my very knowledgeable audience. So thanks, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.